Durban, a city that thrums with energy even after the sun dips below the horizon. The streets are alive with the mingling scents of braised smoke, salt from the Indian Ocean, and the faint sweetness of roadside vendors selling fetcook and sugarcane juice. At night, the city hums in layers. The footfalls of people heading home or out to social hubs, the rumble of taxis weaving through traffic, and the pulse of music from every corner, drifting over concrete, sand, and streetlights. This is a Durban that Kiernan Forbes, known to the world as AKA, loved, and yet on the night of February 10th, 2023, it became the backdrop for a tragedy that would shock a nation. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a true crime story that uncovers the truth behind high-profile cases like this one. Kiernan had risen from humble beginnings in Cape Town to become one of South Africa's most recognizable voices in hip-hop. His lyrics were a tapestry of ambition, struggle, triumph, and vulnerability, a reflection of the world around him and the man he had become. Durban had always held a special place for him. The city's streets echoed with rhythm, energy, and life. He arrived in the city that evening not for a performance, not for a studio session, but for something simpler, dinner with a close friend, a moment of normalcy amidst the chaos of fame. Tabello, Tibbs Matsoane, chef, entrepreneur, and confidant, had driven from Johannesburg to join him. Together they had plans to celebrate, to talk, to enjoy the rare freedom of anonymity that even celebrity of AKA stature sometimes craved. Their evening was calm, laughter shared over plates of local cuisine, glasses clinking gently under the warm glow of the restaurant's ambient lighting. It was a typical night in appearance, unremarkable to any outsider, but the air carried an undercurrent, subtle yet undeniable, a tension almost imperceptible to the casual observer. In a city where violence often lay hidden behind neon-lit facades and crowded nightlife, every footstep on the pavement could carry danger. Durban's streets were beautiful, vibrant, alive, but beneath that vibrancy lay a reality that many never spoke of. The proximity of organized crime, the shadow of violent disputes, and the undercurrent of long-standing grudges that could erupt without warning. After dinner, AKA and Tibbs exited the restaurant. The cool night air wrapped around them, a contrast to the warmth inside. They approached the car, parked along Florida Road, a street that was as familiar to them as the lines of their own hands. The city lights reflected off the chrome of vehicles, casting fractured glimmers across the asphalt. For most passers-by, it was an ordinary scene. Two men returned to their car, chatting lightly, smiling, unaware that the world they knew was about to shatter. Moments later, the ordinary transformed into the unthinkable. Two armed men emerged from the shadows. How quickly events unfold in the night. The flash of gunfire, the crack of metal against metal, the screams and chaos that follow. In seconds, the calm of a Durban evening was replaced by terror. Tibbs, caught in the storm of bullets, was wounded but alive. AKA was struck multiple times, his life extinguished in the briefest of moments. The aftermath was immediate and deafening. Eyewitnesses froze on sidewalks, some screaming, some instinctively ducking for cover. Passers-by dialed emergency numbers, reporting what they had just witnessed, voices shaking as the weight of the event settled over them. The crime scene became a temporary theater of grief, confusion, and shock, a stark contrast to the joyful streets only moments before. Within hours, social media was aflame. News outlets reported the killing of one of South Africa's most prominent musicians. Fans across the country were in disbelief. Tributes poured in online, messages of love and anger mixing in equal measure. The incident was quickly labeled one of the most shocking crimes in recent memory, a brutal act that pierced the public consciousness. Law enforcement responded swiftly. The South African Police Service, SAPS, cordoned off the scene, canvassed witnesses, and recovered forensic evidence. Shell casings, ballistic traces, and surveillance footage from nearby buildings. Detectives began piecing together the timeline, analyzing every detail from the moment AKA left the restaurant to the final, fatal shots. Investigators noted the precision of the attack, the manner in which the perpetrators disappeared into the night. Patterns emerged, pointing premeditation, coordination, and meticulous planning. This was not a random act of violence. It was calculated, targeted, and chilling in its execution. Months passed as the investigation intensified. Leads traced the movements of suspects across provincial lines, and eventually across borders. The case became a national obsession. Analysts dissected surveillance footage. Journalists dug into AKA's personal and professional life, and law enforcement agencies worked in tandem to uncover every thread of this complex tapestry. By 2024, the trail led to the Kingdom of Eswatini. Investigators coordinated with local authorities to identify and track the Ndimande brothers, Sayabonga and Malusi, who were implicated in the attack. Legal channels were activated to secure extradition, and the pursuit became a matter of international cooperation, a high-stakes game of precision and persistence, where every misstep could let the alleged perpetrators slip further into the shadows. Public reaction to these developments was intense. Fans, fellow musicians, and ordinary citizens followed the story closely. Social media remained a pulse point for outrage, grief, and speculation. Family members spoke publicly, advocating for justice and transparency, while also mourning profound personal loss that no investigation could immediately rectify. November 11th, 2025, marked a turning point. After a protracted legal process in Eswatini, the Ndimande brothers were extradited to South Africa. Their arrival in Durban was under heavy security, a procession marked by silence and tension as law enforcement escorted them through an airport thrumming with both media and curiosity. Court appearances followed, formal charges were filed, and the nation watched with bated breath as the wheels of justice began to turn. And yet, beyond the procedural steps, beyond the legal terminology, what remained was human grief. The grief of a father who had lost his son, of a mother who would never again hear the laughter that once filled their home, of a city shaken to its core. AKA's life had been vibrant, his art resonant, and his absence left an emptiness that statistics, reports, and court filings could never fill. In this story, we follow not just a crime, but the intricate web surrounding it. The culture of Durban streets, the tension between fame and vulnerability, the intersection of ambition and danger. We look at the families, the loved ones who bear scars invisible to the public eye, and investigators who navigate a complex landscape of threats, leads, and moral responsibility. From this point, the narrative unfolds in layers. The meticulous reconstruction of that fateful night, the unfolding investigation, the public and private toll, the legal battles that will stretch for months, and the slow, grinding process of justice. Every step is measured, every decision critical, and every moment a reminder of the fragility of life, even for those who seem untouchable in the glow of celebrity. Durban at night remains beautiful, and it remains dangerous. The streets continue to hum, the ocean continues to whisper, and the city breathes on, unaware of the permanence of its losses, yet carrying their memory in the collective consciousness. And in that quiet, reflective pause, one cannot help but ask, how does a city reconcile the brilliance of its sons and daughters with the shadows that follow them? How does a community process the sudden absence of a figure who seemed larger than life? In the coming chapters of this story, we will explore the rise of Kiernan, aka Forbes, the man behind persona, the son, the friend, the artist. We will reconstruct the moments of that night in painstaking detail, relying on verified evidence and witness testimony. We will trace the steps of the investigation as it crossed provincial and national lines, culminating in the extradition of the Ndimande brothers. And we will look at the broader cultural and societal implications, the ripples through the music industry, the taxi industry, and South African society at large. This is a story of life cut short, of grief and resilience, of justice sought and partially realized, and of a city forced to confront both the brilliance and fragility of its own. It is a story that is still being written, and one that demands our attention, our reflection, and our empathy. And so, as we begin this journey, let us step slowly, listen carefully, and bear witness to the events that forever changed Durban, South Africa, and the world of music. The moments immediately after AKA's death were chaotic, surreal, and suffused with grief. Durban streets, normally alive with rhythm and color, were now punctuated by flashing police lights, anxious murmurs, and the low thrum of helicopters circling above. Reporters arrived almost immediately, drawn by the magnitude of the story. Their cameras captured the cordoned-off scene, the evidence markers littering the asphalt, and the stunned expressions of bystanders who could not fathom what they had witnessed. Police officers secured the area meticulously. Forensic teams moved with purpose, taking photographs, collecting shell casings, and marking every trace of evidence with precision. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses was gathered, cataloged, and analyzed. Every detail mattered. The time a door opened, the angle of a shadow, the position of a discarded object. Each fragment held potential significance in reconstructing the sequence of events. Investigators began mapping out the timeline. Security cameras captured glimpses of the attackers fleeing the scene in a dark-colored vehicle. Witnesses gave fragmented accounts. Some remembered a sudden flash of movement, a loud crack, a man collapsing, and then nothing but chaos. The detectives painstakingly pieced together these narratives, aware that memory and moment of extreme fear could be unreliable, but each account offered clues, however small, to the identity and intentions of the perpetrators. Early investigations suggested sophistication. The shooters appeared to have planned the attack with chilling precision, coordinating their approach and escape routes. Ballistics analyses confirmed multiple weapons were used, and the angles of the shots indicated knowledge of the target's movements. The attack was not impulsive. It was executed with intent, and the implications were clear. The person behind this wanted AKA dead, and the message was deliberate. In the days following the murder, the South African Police Service, SAPS, launched an exhaustive manhunt. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, checked traffic cameras, and traced vehicle registrations. The Durban Metro Police collaborated with national units and Hawks. South Africa's Director for Priority Crime Investigation joined the effort to track down the suspects. Tip lines were flooded with information, some credible, some wild speculation, but each lead was followed, analyzed, and cross-checked. Meanwhile, the public response was extraordinary. Social media platforms became forums for mourning, anger, and speculation. Fans flooded timelines with tributes, images of AKA, and lyrics that now carried a heavier weight of meaning. Fellow musicians and celebrities issued statements of grief and outrage, demanding justice and emphasizing the pervasive threat of violence in communities where fame often intersects with risk. Durban, for its part, began to experience a collective sense of loss. Streets that had once been filled with music now echoed with the silence of absence. Investigators quickly identified potential motives. AKA had been involved in business dealings, collaborations, and rivalries within the South African music industry, as well as conflicts linked to local criminal networks. While these lines of inquiry were sensitive and complex, law enforcement treated each angle with care, cross-referencing accounts from industry insiders, friends, and witnesses. It became clear that multiple spheres, music, business, and organized crime, converged in ways that complicated the investigation. By mid-2023, the case had expanded to involve multiple dockets. One docket focused on the direct perpetrators and the immediate circumstances of the shooting. Another examined the financial trails that could have funded the attack. A third explored broader networks potentially implicated in organized crime. This multi-pronged approach was critical. SAPS understood that high-profile murders rarely occurred in isolation, and every lead could reveal connections beyond what was immediately visible. The investigative team employed modern forensic tools, gunshot residue analysis, DNA testing, and digital tracking. Every device, every call log, and every transaction became a piece of the puzzle. Analysts traced phone pings and bank transfers, uncovering patterns that suggested coordination and planning. It was meticulous work, often tedious and painstaking, but in a case with so many moving parts, patience and precision were essential. As the investigation progressed, the narrative of the murder began to emerge more clearly. Authorities identified two brothers as primary suspects, Sayabonga Gazani Ndimande and Malusi Dave Ndimande. Their names had appeared repeatedly in connection with earlier violent incidents in the KwaZulu-Natal region, including disputes involving local taxi associations and business conflicts. While their involvement was still officially under investigation, law enforcement treated them as persons of interest, building evidence for potential charges. Public interest in the case was relentless. Every press conference, every update, was met with intense scrutiny. News outlets across the country chronicled the investigation in real time, highlighting both the tragedy of AKA's death and the broader societal implications. Experts weighed in on television and radio, discussing the intersection of fame, crime, and vulnerability in South African cities. Psychologists, cultural commentators, and musicians contributed insights into the pressures faced by public figures like AKA, whose visibility made them targets not just of admiration, but also of envy and hostility. In the midst of the investigation, attention also turned to the survivor of the attack, Tebs Matsoane. His account was critical. Though injured, he provided key observations: the appearance of the shooters, the sequence of events, and the moments immediately before and after the gunfire. Investigators treated his testimony with the utmost care, corroborating it with forensic evidence and surveillance footage. Each detail, no matter how small, had the potential to unlock critical breakthroughs in the case. As months passed, leads began to converge. Investigators traced movements across provincial lines, noting patterns of travel and communication linked to the Ndimande brothers. It became evident that this was a cross-jurisdictional matter. The suspects had moved fluidly, taking advantage of borders and the complexities of local enforcement. Cooperation with neighboring countries, particularly Eswatini, became essential. Diplomatic channels were engaged, and discussions regarding extradition protocols began. Meanwhile, the cultural impact of AKA's murder was profound. South African music, particularly hip-hop, responded with vigils, tribute songs, and public calls for justice. Social media campaigns amplified the message. #JusticeForAid trended, uniting fans, artists, and ordinary citizens in shared grief. The tragedy sparked conversations about safety, crime, and the societal pressures faced by those in the public eye. Within law enforcement, the case had become a priority. Teams worked around the clock, sifting through digital evidence, financial records, and witness statements. Every lead was meticulously documented, analyzed, and cross-referenced. Analysts identified potential financial backers and logistical supporters of the attack. Though the connections were complex and required further verification, by early 2024, the investigation had yielded critical breakthroughs. Travel records, digital footprints, and corroborated witness statements pointed increasingly toward the Ndimande brothers. SAPS coordinated with Eswatini authorities, preparing formal extradition requests. Legal teams reviewed the evidence meticulously, ensuring that the case would withstand scrutiny in both jurisdictions. The public, meanwhile, followed developments with unwavering attention. Updates were broadcast on national television, online news platforms, and radio. Citizens debated the implications, expressed outrage, and mourned collectively. The case had transcended a simple murder investigation. It had become a lens through which South Africans examined the intersections of crime, fame, and societal vulnerability. Investigators also considered broader implications. High-profile murders often expose networks of violence previously hidden from view. By carefully tracing the movements, financial exchanges, and communications surrounding AKA's death, authorities hoped not only to bring the perpetrators to justice, but also to dismantle larger criminal operations. The investigation became both a pursuit of accountability for a beloved artist and a measure against systemic criminality. Every thread pulled in the investigation reinforced the complexity of the case. Multiple suspects, financial entanglements, and cross-border movement created a scenario where patience, precision, and relentless scrutiny were essential. Investigators knew that a misstep could allow suspects to evade justice, and the stakes, both legally and socially, were enormous. As 2024 progressed, the groundwork for extradition solidified. Authorities in Eswatini coordinated with South African officials to ensure the legal process would be smooth, minimizing delays and obstacles. Diplomatic channels, legal filings, and security arrangements were meticulously prepared. The world watched, awaiting the moment when the alleged perpetrators would face the South African justice system. November 11th, 2025, a date that would mark a pivotal moment in a saga that had haunted South Africa for nearly 3 years. After months of legal maneuvering, diplomacy, and tireless coordination between South African and Eswatini authorities, the Ndimande brothers, Siyabonga Gazani and Malusi Dave, were finally extradited to South Africa. Their arrival at King Shaka International Airport in Durban was carried out under tight security. Armored vehicles flanked the transport, officers moved in disciplined formations, and the air carried a tension so thick that even the faintest sound seemed amplified. For months, the public had followed every development in the case, from the shocking killing of Kiernan at Forbes on Florida Road, Durban, to the painstaking cross-border investigation that had identified the Ndimande brothers as alleged orchestrators. The extradition itself was a culmination of a delicate legal ballet. Documents had to be verified, legal challenges addressed, and security risks mitigated. Every step of the process was fraught with potential pitfalls. Yet the authorities navigated the system with precision, determined to see the suspects face the South African justice system. The airport terminal was unusually quiet for such a high-profile transfer. Media personnel and law enforcement filled the space, cameras clicking, microphones recording every word, every movement. The Ndimande brothers were flanked by officers, their faces calm but guarded, their hands restrained. Observers noted the somber gravity of the moment. This was more than an extradition. It was the first public acknowledgement of the legal consequences awaiting them. Once inside the secure zone, the brothers were escorted directly to waiting vehicles and transported under heavy police protection to the Durban Magistrates Court. The city itself seemed to hold its breath. Durban had been forever changed by the murder, and the arrival of the alleged perpetrators brought the story back into the public consciousness with renewed intensity. Citizens gathered outside court precincts, journalists pressed for details, and social media once again buzzed with speculation, outrage, and grief. In the courtroom, the gravity of the proceedings was evident. Magistrates, prosecutors, and defense attorneys assembled with meticulous attention to protocol. The Ndimande brothers appeared before the court under formal charges: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful possession of firearms, and ammunition. These charges, detailed in multiple dockets, were the culmination of the meticulous investigation that had traced the attack from Florida Road through provincial and international channels. The charges also reflected the broader scope of criminal activity allegedly connected to the brothers. Investigators had identified patterns linking them to other acts of violence, including disputes within the taxi industry and a series of shootings in KwaZulu-Natal. While each case remained under investigation and pending trial, the cumulative weight of these allegations painted a picture of coordinated, organized criminal activity with a capacity for lethal force. In parallel with the legal proceedings, public scrutiny intensified. Families of victims, fans of AKA, and concerned citizens awaited updates with bated breath. Analysts discussed the implications on news platforms. The case highlighted both the vulnerability of public figures in South Africa and the systemic challenges faced by law enforcement in addressing cross-border crime. Cultural commentators noted that AKA's murder resonated far beyond the music industry, touching on themes of urban violence, organized crime, and societal inequities. Inside the courtroom, the magistrate emphasized the seriousness of the charges, confirming that the accused will remain in custody pending further legal proceedings. Bail applications were denied, reflecting both the gravity of the offenses and the potential flight risk posed by the accused. The brothers were remanded to secure detention facilities, a step that reinforced the state's commitment to ensuring that justice would not be delayed. Meanwhile, investigators continued to trace the financial and logistical networks allegedly behind the murder. Reports indicated that the attack had been funded through intricate channels involving business accounts, payments to intermediaries, and coordination that spanned regional boundaries. The goal, according to investigative sources, was to obscure the trail of funding and minimize detection. Forensic accountants and digital analysts worked tirelessly to map these connections, seeking evidence that could substantiate charges of conspiracy and complicity. This financial dimension added a layer of complexity to the case. It suggested not only premeditation but also organizational capacity, an ability to plan, fund, and execute a violent act with precision. Authorities treated this evidence with care, recognizing that it could become central to proving intent and involvement in court. As the brothers settled into custody, families of the victims struggled to reconcile hope with grief. The Forbes family, in particular, maintained a dignified yet visibly strained public presence. Tony Forbes, AKA's father, spoke of both sorrow and cautious optimism, expressing a desire to see the legal process unfold transparently. He emphasized the importance of accountability, not just for murder itself, but for the broader message it sent about violence and justice in South Africa. The public response was equally intense. Social media platforms erupted with commentary, analysis, and speculation. Hashtags such as #JusticeForDay trended nationwide, while fans organized vigils, tributes, and online memorials. The cultural resonance of AK's death extended beyond music. It became a national conversation about safety, celebrity, and the responsibilities of authorities in a society grappling with high rates of violent crime. Legal analysts began dissecting the case. They emphasized the challenges ahead: complex evidence, multiple dockets, cross-border legal considerations, and the need to ensure procedural integrity. Every witness, every document, and every piece of forensic evidence would be scrutinized. The courts would navigate these complexities, balancing the demands of justice with the rights of the accused. As proceedings moved forward, emerging details began to shed light on the alleged coordination behind the murder. Investigators reported that payments had been made to intermediaries who were allegedly tasked with executing the attack. The precision of the operation suggested training, planning, and careful selection of personnel. Each revelation deepened the narrative of calculated violence, underscoring the stakes for both the victims' families and South African society at large. In the weeks following the extradition, the case evolved into a high-profile national story. Courts prepared for extended proceedings. The media closely followed developments, and investigators continued to uncover the financial and logistical underpinnings of the attack. The story of AKA's murder had expanded far beyond a single night in Durban. It had become a lens through which to examine criminal networks, societal vulnerability, and the capacity of law enforcement to respond effectively to complex, organized violence. The trial of Sayabonga and Malusi Ndimande commenced under an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The Durban Magistrates' Court, usually a place of procedural routine, had been transformed into the epicenter of a nation's collective attention. Journalists, photographers, and television crews filled every available space, while the public followed developments through live broadcasts and social media streams. The courtroom itself was a microcosm of tension. The accused sat flanked by legal counsel, their demeanor cautious, measured, yet watchful. Prosecutors arranged their materials meticulously, and the judge, aware of the case's gravity, presided with solemn authority. From the outset, the proceedings were complex. Prosecutors presented the chronology of February 10, 2023, establishing the sequence of events leading to AK's death. Witness testimony was corroborated by forensic evidence, shell casings, ballistic trajectories, and digital surveillance, painting a detailed portrait of the attack. Investigators detailed the planning, the execution, and the flight of the alleged perpetrators, emphasizing both premeditation and coordination. The narrative constructed in court echoed the broader investigation. This was not a random act of violence, but targeted, calculated killing. Throughout the hearings, the human element was impossible to ignore. Family members of AKA attended proceedings regularly, their presence a poignant reminder of the personal tragedy behind the legal documentation. Tony Forbes, AKA's father, and family representatives bore witness to the trial with stoic resolve, occasionally whispering to one another as the prosecution presented new evidence. Each piece of information carried the weight of memory, grief, and hope, a delicate balance between seeking justice and reliving the trauma of loss. The legal process was thorough. Defense attorneys challenged the admissibility of certain evidence, questioned witness reliability, and scrutinized procedural adherence. Prosecutors countered with cross-reference documentation, forensic reports, and corroborating statements, demonstrating the meticulous preparation underpinning the case. Observers noted the interplay of strategy and procedure, understanding that in high-profile cases, both the facts and the presentation of those facts can sway outcomes. Beyond the courtroom, public engagement remained intense. South Africans of all backgrounds followed developments with rapt attention. Music fans organized tributes outside the court, carrying banners, photographs, and candles. Discussions proliferated on radio and television as analysts debated the legal implications, the motivations behind the murder, and the broader societal issues illuminated by the case. Crime experts, cultural commentators, and social psychologists weighed in, dissecting the intersection of fame, organized violence, and societal vulnerability. The trial also provided a lens into the operational intricacies of South African law enforcement. The meticulous documentation of evidence, the collaboration across provincial and national jurisdictions, and the coordination with international counterparts were all on display. Investigators' testimonies highlighted the complexity of modern criminal networks and the dedication required to navigate them. Every call, transfer, and digital trace was scrutinized, underscoring the painstaking work necessary to build a case capable of withstanding rigorous judicial review. Amid these procedural developments, attention turned to financial and organizational networks behind the alleged attack. Prosecutors outlined the channels of funding, payments to intermediaries, and logistical arrangements that had facilitated the murder. These revelations illuminated the scale of coordination involved and the premeditation underpinning the act. Analysts noted that dismantling these networks would have implications far beyond this case, potentially curbing organized violence in the region. The public, meanwhile, wrestled with the emotional weight of the trial, mourning intertwined with outrage. Fans lamented the loss of a vibrant artist whose lyrics had inspired countless South Africans, while commentators highlighted the structural issues exposed by the case, the vulnerability of public figures, the reach of organized crime, and the challenges of policing in a society where violence often lurks in the margins. Social media became both a forum for grief and a platform for advocacy, reflecting the intersection of culture, technology, and public engagement in modern South Africa. As the trial progressed, witnesses detailed the sequence of events with precision, shedding light on the actions of both the accused and the immediate circumstances surrounding the shooting. Forensic experts explained ballistic trajectories, medical examiners recounted the nature of injuries, and law enforcement personnel described the investigative steps that had led to identification and apprehension. The narrative was detailed, compelling, and deeply human, a reminder that behind the procedural complexity lay a life abruptly ended and the grief of those left behind. Family statements added an emotional dimension. Tony Forbes spoke during designated testimony sessions, conveying profound personal impact of his son's death. He emphasized the need for transparency and accountability, reminding the court and the public that the pursuit of justice was inseparable from the acknowledgement of human loss. These moments punctuated the trial, grounding the legal procedures in the reality of human suffering. The broader societal implications of the trial were also evident. Analysts and commentators discussed the risks faced by public figures, the influence of organized crime on urban life, and the cultural resonance of AKA's music. His death prompted conversations about security, mentorship, and systemic solutions to reduce violence in South Africa. Forums and panel discussions proliferated, linking legal outcomes to policy debates, social interventions, and the responsibilities of communities in fostering safer environments. As evidence mounted, the prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditation and intent. They detailed how the alleged perpetrators coordinated travel, prepared firearms, and executed the attack with precision. Each step in the chain of events was scrutinized and presented, revealing a pattern of organization that underscored the seriousness of the charges. The defense, meanwhile, maintained focus on procedural challenges, witness credibility, and gaps in evidence, highlighting the adversarial tension inherent in the judicial process. Outside the courtroom, public sentiment remained intense. Vigils continued, fan tributes persisted, and social media remained active. Hashtag Justice for AK became more than a hashtag. It symbolized collective mourning, societal reflection, and the demand for accountability. Artists released tribute songs, interviews reflected on his influence, and commentators explored his legacy, both personal and cultural. The impact of his life and death had become woven into the social fabric of South Africa. As the trial unfolded, legal experts emphasized that the case could set precedents. The complexity of cross-border coordination, the role of organized crime, and the handling of high-profile evidence were all aspects likely to influence future prosecutions. The judicial system's ability to navigate these intricacies would not only determine outcomes for the accused, but also shape public trust and confidence in the justice process. At the same time, the human element remained central. Families and friends of the deceased navigated grief in the public eye, balancing personal mourning with the national attention the case attracted. Their courage and resilience highlighted the enduring emotional consequences of violent crime, underscoring the need for empathetic storytelling in the retelling of such events. Ultimately, the murder of AKA, the killing of a talented artist whose music had touched millions, is a story that encompasses more than a single act of violence. It speaks to societal vulnerabilities, the reach of organized criminal networks, and the enduring quest for justice in the face of tragedy. The trial of the Ndimande brothers represents both an opportunity for legal accountability and a public reckoning with the structures that allow such violence to occur. The legacy of AK persists in the culture he shaped. His lyrics continue to inspire, his performances are remembered with admiration, and his life, though tragically cut short, serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between fame, vulnerability, and societal pressures. In reflecting on this case, one confronts not only the facts of the crime, but also the broader implications, the need for justice, societal reflection, and the preservation of human dignity in the aftermath of violence. In the end, the story of AKA's murder is a narrative of both tragedy and resilience, grief and reflection, loss and remembrance. It is a reminder of the fragility of life, the weight of societal responsibility, and the enduring power of music and human connection to transcend even the darkest of moments.